Okay, so now I'm going to do some rigging with controls and corrective blend shapes to Unreal Engine. This can be quite a tricky subject. Just going to basically create a simple mesh, rig it up, give it some controls, and the problem comes in when you export these controls to Unreal Engine. Funny things happen, so I'm gonna just play around a bit and see what works. I've done this yesterday and played around with it a little bit, so let's see how it goes. I'm going to start by just creating a simple mesh. I'm going to make this mesh multi-part, so this is just a cylinder. Just going to make it go, I don't know, let's go 16 across.
We're all set. Drive safely.
And zero it out to the origin. Okay. Yeah, I think this will be alright. I'm just going to use the cylinder here as a base. Let's delete the history on that. So it's still got a bit of translation there. We'll fix that in a little bit. I just want to get this mesh cleaned up a little bit. Because I don't really like those triangles on the caps. I'm just getting rid of every other.
We're all set. Drive safely.
Oh, I messed up a little bit there. These ones are wrong. Let's just do that again. Okay. Delete the history on this and just do a quick mesh check. Clean up. Okay. Harden the edges. I do want some spans across here. So I'm just going to halve these a few times for better deformation. As half as I can get it. Doesn't have to be perfect for this. So I'm basically just going to try and establish a workflow, and whatever I do here I'm going to apply it to the fish characters, or try to, and see what works. The minute you start doing corrective blend shapes and exporting that or importing that into Unreal Engine, it can be tricky. The order of the blend shapes are important, and there are a few other things which we'll get to. Okay, let's clear the history on that. Harden the edges and just see I want to create a multi-part mesh because it's always a good test. I'm just gonna put the center of the pivot at the origin. I'm going to duplicate this mesh as well. Let's give this some name. I'll just call this test rig. So 1 and 2. I'm going to group these. And I'm also going to put the geo in a layer so I can just hide it if they get in the way or set them to reference if I don't want to be able to click on them. I'll just call that the geo layer. I want to make sure my transformations are frozen, so everything's set to 0 in the channel box. And then I don't need this to be this hard, so I'm going to soften the edges on these. They're going to look a little bit funny, but that's okay. Unlock the normals. Clear the history again. Now I'm just going to create a simple rig here, I think with 3 bones, 3 joints. Let's save it. Call it something. I've done these before earlier, so I'm just going to call this test rig 2. So the idea is going to be I'm first going to export the rig on its own with no animation, well, into Unreal Engine to get the skeleton there, and then the idea is you're going to be adding animation as many as you want with the corrective blend shapes, and then you want to be importing that into Unreal Engine. And that's where the trick comes in, because if you just import it into Unreal Engine every time with the corrective blend shapes, it's going to overwrite your mesh, and you actually want to keep one mesh and just keep on updating the animation. If you didn't have corrective blend shapes, this would be a simple process. You could literally just import animation using the straightforward exporting FBX, and when you import, I mean literally you could just select the joints themselves without even bothering with the mesh, but because we're doing corrective blend shapes, that's where the trick comes in. So let's get to it. I'm going to create a joint here. I'm going to choose a view. I'm going to go with the side view. And place that one more in the middle. No, I don't like that. Let's go up there. Something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's too many. I'd like to split these anyway. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little bit more than I had earlier. I'd rather keep to the demo for now. I'm gonna split. That's fine. I think it'll work. Let's try it like this. Ghost the joints so I can see them. And let's expand the hierarchy here. So here I'm going up to 5. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these joints are all oriented in the same direction. So let's just save this and see what happens. Selecting all of the joints and just turning on the transformation of the rotation axis. I'm going to hide the geo for a second, get rid of the grid. Okay, they look pretty good except for the last one. The last one doesn't actually matter, but there's a little trick to get this guy to orient the same way as these ones. It's really simple. If I can remember, I just need to go to the orient joint options, and I'm just going to choose orient joint to world. That's actually going to just orient it to its parent. That should just work magically. Okay, now all my joints are oriented the same way. I want the X pointing to the direction of the child, which I prefer, and then Z just facing toward me, I guess, and Y facing out. So X would be yaw, Y would be pitch, and Z would be pivot, I guess. And pivot's not really the right word. Okay, I'm going to rename these joints. I like to start my naming convention. I'll just call this a spine, even though I know it's not technically a spine. And then just increment the number here. What makes this nice is I can easily select these joints if I wanted to, using my selection bar here. And let's hide these. I don't need to see those orientation axes. Save. Now the orientation of my mesh is not important, so that's fine. If I were to export this to Unreal, it would just create a normal skeletal mesh, which is awesome. So let's do some controls. Controls would allow you to more easily manipulate these bones in Maya to create animations. So I'm trying something new, something I haven't done before. See if it works. I want to create a control for each of these joints, except number 5. I don't really care about the little nib there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a NURBS. I'm going to use a sphere. And you can only blow it up to 10, I think. Previously this was a little bit too small. It doesn't matter, I'm just going to use the scale. Get it to the scale I want. I'm going to use this as my control. I'm going to set the geo on a reference layer so I can't select it. And then there's something else I want to do. I'm going to just position this a little bit better. I'm going to give this some funky transparent material. And just make it semi-transparent. I'll probably go for something a little bit more yellow. Let's assign that. It looks a little bit funny. That's okay. You can see it's fighting the polygons there. It's okay. This is not going to go into the game anyway. This is just to get an easy easy handle on controlling the controls. So this is going to be the control for the first joint, so I'm just going to keep the naming convention the same. But immediately there's a problem. I also want the skeleton to be in its own layer, so I'm just going to create a joint layer here so I can show and hide the skeleton if I wanted to. The controls orientation doesn't match the joint, and I want it to, because I'm going to connect up the controls rotation to the joint's rotation, so that when you rotate this control here, it's going to automatically rotate the joint. I can actually just hide the geo here for a second. So what I want is, as you rotate this, the joint should rotate that it forms a part of. And I also just want to change it a little bit. I don't love the positioning here. I'm going to squash it a little bit. That might not be what I want. Let's see. That might work a bit better. I don't know. We'll see. So the orientation here doesn't match the skeleton, and that's going to be a problem. Actually, yeah, it doesn't match up. Okay, so to fix that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the control in a group. Just going to call this my control group, and prefix it with an underscore to make selecting controls on their own simpler without selecting the group. And I'm going to orient the group to match the skeleton's orientation. There's an easy way to do this. You can select the group and select the object you want to match, and you could use match transformation. I'm just going to use rotation, and that's wrong. And now I also realize why my scaling isn't working. Gotta love live demos. My pivot is off. I think that's a problem. Okay, maybe not. Just doing something weird here. I'm gonna move him down. Okay, back to reorienting. So I'm going to set the pivot of the group to match the center of the geometry, or its direct child, for a reason. Because this is actually what I want to reorient. I want to reorient the group to match this guy. So I've got, let's see, that's Z facing in this way, so that's right. I want X facing up, obviously, so let's rotate it. X facing up, so I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. And I think that's good. So now what I'm going to do is select the child, and I've rotated the wrong one, which is great. That's because of my options up here. You can either select by hierarchy and combinations, which when I click this, it will select the group, and if I choose the one next to it, it will actually select the child. So keep on clicking on it and I'm selecting the wrong one. Okay, so X is up, and we want the Z facing forward, so let's do this again. Click the group, do the rotation. That should do it. And now the simple little trick, I'm going to select the child and just hit freeze transformation on the child. So now the controls transformation is matching my skeleton's transformation, which is what I wanted. Because I'm going to directly connect the rotation of this control to the corresponding joint. I might reposition this guy still a little bit differently. So let's just freeze him again, and I'm just going to duplicate this guy and move him to here. I feel he's a bit too big, so I'm going to just scale him down a little bit and freeze him. Duplicate him again, give this guy a control, scale him up a little bit, freeze, and duplicate him, get this guy up here. You should be more over there, I think. Let's see. It's a bit of a funny setup. I need to scale this guy up a little bit. And I think that's okay. This guy is a little bit too big. Size is important because you want to be able to easily get hold of them. Right, freezing them all. Double checking the orientation. Z facing toward me. Y facing out and X facing up. The red is X. And that should match the skeleton as well. That's what I wanted. Because I haven't done any deformation, I should be able to just delete all history. And I'm just going to connect these up, these what I call controls. Let's change the color a little bit here. And this is something I probably want to use for the game. This color control scheme. For me it works a bit better than shapes. Don't love that green. It's too green. Let's get more yellow, more neutral. Okay, and at any time if I'm not happy with the controls, what I want to do is get them all in a layer, or preferably rather add the group, not the individual controls. Well, I guess it depends on what you want to do. Maybe you could create different groups to hide different controls if you wanted. So you could just hide the controls at any time they're in the way or whatever. Now hooking them up. So I want to connect the attributes of the rotation of this control to my spine joint here. Let's get rid of the geometry. So that when I rotate this control, my spine's going to go along the joint. And I've done this using a simple little Python script. All this does is calls connect adder and just connects the rotation of the object that you selected first to the object that you selected second. And then it also creates a parent constraint, which I'll explain in just 1 second. So if I were to do this manually, you could do this through the node editor. Let's open up the node editor quick. I could bring in these two guys here. I don't need the shape, so let's just get rid of him. So I would want to say expand this guy. I could literally connect the rotation up to the rotation of that guy, and that's what the script would do. Now if I do that and I rotate the control, the spine will rotate, but there's a problem. If I do the same for the second one, so let's do control 2 to spine 2. So where's my control 2? There you are. Shape, go away. and I connect the rotation up here. The problem I have is if I move this control doesn't go along with it, and that's why I'm using this parent constraint here. But this parent constraint actually specifies don't include rotation, because that would be counterproductive. I'm supplying the rotation, which in turn rotates this joint here, and then what I want to happen is any movement or any translation and any orientation, I want its anything parent constraint to it to also inherit, but I don't want the rotation, which sounds a little weird, but it works. So let's go back to the node editor, and if you just use a point constraint, it doesn't work the same. Parent constraint includes other properties that I want. So node editor, let me just break these connections. And I'm just going to remove these from the editor. I don't need them. Right. So now we're back to where we were. Nothing's moving when I rotate this guy. So I'm going to use my script here. Like I said, it connects rotation and does a parent constraint ignoring X, Y, and Z rotation. Let's see if this works. I'm going to select the driver first, and then the driven, connect it up. The driver and then the driven, connect it up. For 3 and number 4, this works. Now when I rotate, my controls go along, which is what I wanted. But what also makes this cool, I think, is if I select all of these and I rotate them. Let's pick an axis. See, they follow along. Granted, it's going to be a little tricky when you have hundreds of these, or very, very small joints next to each other with very thick geometry like this, to get this working. But I think in most cases you should be fine. For fingers and things like that, I think you could even use controls as cylinders. And then to set these back to the original, obviously for any control you just set it back to 0. All your controls are always at zeros. Alright, so now that's done. Now the next step is I just want to skin this up. I don't want to hit delete history here now. I want to hit delete non-deformer history. Otherwise bad things happen. So I think I'm happy with this. Okay, for the skinning, let's get rid of the controls. We're going to do a simple skinning here. Let's get my geo back selectable out of reference mode. I want to make 100% sure my geo is clean. Freeze transformations. There's nothing dodgy happening here. Non-deformer history delete. Save it again. Okay, let's try. I'm going to select the group and then the top level skeleton. There's obviously usually more than one way to do all of this stuff. So I'm going to hit my smooth bind. I'm going to choose joint hierarchy. If you're going to choose selected joints and you have meshes in here that you export to Unreal Engine to a known skeleton, and those joints are not in that FBX, your mesh will not import. It will cry. So always choose joint hierarchy for Unreal Engine. That's what you want to do. I always keep it at 4. I don't know what the max influence is these days of Unreal Engine. Maybe a video for another day. Let's bind them and just see what happens. I think that's right. Okay. Start moving something around here. Here's my controls. Now I don't want to be able to select the geo for a bit now, so I just want to get rid of that. Okay, and now you say, but wow, I can't really see what it's doing. because of my horrible control scheme, which is true. Other geometry didn't look like this, but okay. So here we go. It's skinned. It's definitely skinned, which is what I wanted. So first test is getting this into Unreal Engine. Zero out the and just see that this is working so far. That's important. So delete non-deformer, just save. I'm just going to select the geometry group and top level spine and hit export here. I'm going to export this as an FBX. I'm going to call this test rig 2, and important things to note here, I'm not going to choose bake animation from here. I don't have any animation, but I will choose animation from this option here. So let's do that and see what happens. I'm getting some error here, which is right. You can't export these constraints. Well, you can, but I told it not to. I wouldn't export constraints to Unreal Engine, it won't work. So let's go to assets and see what happens. Those constraints it's talking about, of course, are these constraints from the node editor, where I connected up the rotation from the sorry, I'm talking complete crap. It's this constraint here, the parent constraint, meaning as this joint moves, it should move the control that's connected to it along with it. So let's see what happens when I import this rig. In this case, I want the mesh, I want the skeletal mesh, the mesh as well. So the skeletal mesh is just a fancy word for the joints, I guess. The mesh itself, the geometry, import animations. I don't have any animations, so I'm just going to hit import, see what happens. We get this funny little weird message here that I still really I haven't really figured that out. I did say import animations. There's no animations on this mesh, and it just did something. What did it do? Where did it get these animations from? Okay. Let me delete this. Seriously. Okay, test rig 2 going in. I do not have any animations. I'm going to untick that and just import it. So I'm just expecting these three guys here. Okay, here we go. Got a rig. Nothing fancy, no morph targets, right? Whoop-de-doo. And here's my skeleton matching up what I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 joints. Okay. I am going to delete these. Okay. Let's create an animation. Basic, simple little animation. When you create an animation for this kind of thing, you're not going to animate the skeleton itself. As tempting as it is, you're not even going to be working with the skeleton most of the time. You won't even see it, and this needs to be much more transparent, I think. Let's hit that up really high. Something like that would be, I'd say, better. Almost barely visible. Okay, so you'd be animating the controls. You'd be creating keyframes on the controls. Now, we haven't done the blend shapes yet. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm just going to create, I don't know, what is this? 120. I prefer 200 frames. There we go. 200 frames. Playing back at I think it's 24 frames per second. I think that's the default that I'm using. Just double check here. 24 frames per second. That's what I want. Meaning what? 1 second is 24 frames of animation, keyframes. So we've got a few seconds here. Whatever it is, 10 seconds or so. 9. Okay. I'm not going to use auto key. I'm going to select these keys here that I've got. I'm going to key only these guys. Normally I would lock and hide, or I should really lock and hide these values here so that you can't inadvertently change them, but I mean for now this is fine. Nothing bad's going to happen. We're all professionals here. Let's key this on. So this is what I would say call the bind pose. 0 transformation, rotation, translation, scale on any of the bones. Moving up to 30, I'm going to add some on the first guy here. Let's rotate him a little bit and set a keyframe here. I'm going to move on to the second guy. He doesn't have a key on here. I'd like to keep him at 0, so I'm just going to key him on 30 and move up to, let's say, I don't know, 45. Give him some rotation. I like creating what's the right word here? Rotations on all axes, just for this test because it's cleaner. Oh, it's dirtier actually. Whatever. Key that. Give me a better idea if this test is actually doing what I think it should be doing. Let's give this guy a little twist going up. So he doesn't have a key on 30. Ooh, that's bad. So let's undo this. Go back to 30. I don't want these guys doing weird stuff from the beginning, so let's move up 50. Number 2, we're going to rotate. Let's go to, where are we now? 75. Key on 0. No, I want to rotate you to there. Key. Let's see what happens. So we've got just a basic little wormy type animation here. I'm just going to invert this. If I do, I need keys for this guy here, and for this guy. Oh, he stayed on 0 the whole time. He's sad. He needs keys. He didn't get any keys. Okay, I can give you some keys here. 55. Something like that. Then he's going to snap back to 0, which I don't want, so I'm just going to delete this key. Right. And make sure he keeps his key there. Right. Key this guy there. I could just select all and key them, really. Okay, so we've got something happening here. Get a bit more extreme on this one. For a reason, key it up. Okay, so we got something here happening. Now I'm just going to invert this. Let's see. Select the controls. Select these keys. No, select this key. Oh, it's going to stay in that key, isn't it? So let's grab this one. Put that guy there. That guy there. Okay, copy you over here. And just the 0 default bind pose to create a looping crappy animation. Delete non-deformer. Save. So I have something. Let's export this to Unreal and see what happens. Haven't done any blend shapes yet. Okay. Select the geometry group, select the root spine, root joint, export the selection. I'm going to call it test rig 2 again. And this time, still chosen animation, but I'm not going to choose bake animation. I'm just going to export this as test rig 2. I'm going to see what happens. It's not happy about the constraints and something about a curved target. Yeah, whatever, I don't care. Let's see. Grab test rig 2. I'm going to try and import animation if you have any. It's getting some weird error. Something about node name hierarchy something. No idea. Let's see what happens. No animation. Good. That's what I wanted. Let's delete it. Just give that guy a chance to save. Alright. Do the export again. This time I'm just going to choose bake. So now these keys, these silly little animations here, have been set on these controls. So these little red things here, so that's where my animation is on, not on my actual spine. If I select my spine, there's not a single key set here. So if I just export the spine and this guy, it's not gonna work because I need to bake the animation, meaning it's gonna run through these keys, keyframes that you specify if there are any, and it will literally see what are the joints doing, these joints here, and it will bake that down into the FBX as an animation, and that's what I want. So now I'm going to export it again as test rig 2, but this time I'm going to choose bake. So I'm saying start at 0, end at frame 200, step 1. Keeping in mind this is not how you would export an animation at all. You would export your rig first. We're going to do that in a second after I've done the blend shapes, because the blend shapes change everything once again, the corrected blend shapes. Screw everything up. Let's do this. Okay, it moaned about something here, and there it says warning, complex animation baked. I guess that's a good thing. I don't know. Let's see. Pull this guy in. Make sure I choose import animations here. I did specify import morph targets, but I have none. And it gives me that funny message about something weird again that I have no idea what it means. Node name hierarchy. I really have to check out what that error means. Okay, let's check animation. Yay, there it is. Crappy. But it's there. Looks weird. Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, how did you do this normally? How would I do this normally? I would export the rig, the mesh and the rig separately first. So I would export these guys. I would not choose bake animation, and I would not choose animation. So I would export it like this. Right? Getting that weird constraint error, that's fine. Expected. Import the rig. This time do not tick animations. Import it. So now we should just get the rig and the skeleton. And there's the material again. Fantastic. Good. And then you would export your animation separately. So you would select, you could just literally just select the skeleton and just export that. And I'm going to export that to test rig 2 anim 1. And I'll call specify animation and bake animation on the FBX export. So test rig 2 anim 1 export. I only selected the spine this time. 77 kilobytes, really tiny, teeny, tiny, small, because it only contains a few transformation matrices. And this time Unreal is pretty clever. It knows you don't have a mesh in here, so I'm not even going to ask you for it. But you have to select skeleton, or I'm going to create a new one. So I have to choose. I'm going to say, okay, import whatever I bring in here into test rig 2 and apply that animation to test rig 2. And let's see what happens. I think this is going to work. We still haven't done the blend shapes. And there we go, we've got an animation. So it used the transformation information from that animation, applied it to this mesh. Fantastic. So you could bring in, happily go and create your animations in here, a bazillion of them, create a new my file for each one, or you could use layers. There are usually more than one way to do all of this stuff. Usually all of them always results in a crash. No, I'm kidding. Okay, this is still not really the demo. I'm gonna delete this because it's not what I want to show. Let's do some corrective blend shapes. I just want to take a quick sip of water here. And then we'll get to the blend shapes. That's a cool drink. So the idea is with the corrective blend shapes, as you have these animations happening in on your mesh, you might see some stuff that you may or may not like. Like, let's say this is a multi-part mesh that contains multiple meshes. It's obviously more complex. But let's say I didn't like the way that this, let's get my geometry selectable here. Let's say I didn't like the way that this looked here, and I wanted to change it for whatever reason, but I only wanted to change it at this point in the animation. You could use this, apply this to as many reasons as you want. Muscles, skin movement, things like that, regarding facial animation or things like that. You know, the applications are quite huge, and I think it's used a lot everywhere. So Maya has a really cool feature. In the old days, what you would have to do is quite a lot of work to apply this blend shape in the right time and place, and then to get it to work using all sorts of fancy connections. Now I'm trying to find a workflow for my game because I'm on a tight deadline, so I need something that can work for me. So I'm going to try this my way and see if it works. So the first thing I'm going to be using Maya's pose manager, pose editor, pose editor. I think it's under animation editors, Maya pose editor. It's got a little blurb here. Begin pose space deformation by selecting the joints. Okay, let's do this. So I'm making sure everything's in the neutral pose, or the T pose, or the A pose, whatever you want to call it, the bind pose. The original pose, when I click bind skin, I guess that's the bind pose. It wants it in a neutral pose where all of your rotations and all of those things are set to 0. Translations are not important here, but rotations for this what I'm after. This is all FK, we're not doing IK. And I'm only going to do it on this multi-part mesh, on this second part here. I'm not going to do it on both because it would take too long. And I still need to do a bit more research on multi-part mesh and testing. But I think this will work. Let's see. So let's hit create pose interpolator. See what happens. It says here begin by selecting the joints. Okay, so I'm doing something wrong already. I'm going to select the joint that I want to apply this on, and that's going to be this guy right here. I think he's getting the rotation at this point here. There I want to apply it on that, so I'm actually on the wrong time. I want to apply it right there. Okay, create the pose interpolator. Make sure you're in the 0 pose. If you're not, bad things happen. Okay, great. Cannot find procedure pose interpolator. My bad. Windows, settings. You have to go to the plugin manager. I have done this before. I don't know why it doesn't remember it. Just look for pose interpolator here. Load it, auto load. Right, in your plugins. Okay, cool. Let's just restart this quickly. I think I've saved this 100 times already. Not going to save it again. Test rig 2. Alright. Is my animation still here? Yay, it is. Okay. Select the top, number 3. Yeah, I definitely want it on number 3. So as number 3 hits that rotation right there, I want to add some corrective blend shapes to do something really weird. Windows, Animation Pose Editor. Create the pose interpolator. Okay, now I'm going to add a pose. Before I can add a pose, I need to tell it what do I actually want to add a pose from, I guess. So I'm going to choose the mesh, which is this guy. Yeah, this guy. Yeah, my geo layer was a reference to this guy. Alrighty, so let's add a pose. If I add a pose here, that would be silly, because that would be the neutral pose, so I don't really want that. I want to add a pose here. Right there. Let's see if that's the right spot. Control 3 has a key on 50. That's the one I want. So let's select that and see if it works. Add a pose. I'm going to create a new blend shape. This says default to pre-deformation. I always get confused between pre and post deformation. I'm going to leave it at pre-deformation because I think the blend shape needs to be applied before the deformation, but I could be wrong. This might need to be post deformation. Let's see. And then which mesh to use, the one that I've selected, which is number 2. I probably also need to select the joint, I think. Let's see, I might be wrong. Create the pose shape. Okay, just the mesh. Now it seems to think I can edit this. Cool, so this thing's red. So I can just go ahead and edit this mesh, which is kinda cool. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit my fall off here and just make some silly changes which have no meaning. I'm gonna use my move normal tool. Just blow this out a little bit. See what happens. I don't know. Let's give this guy here some loadiness. And just to make sure it's very visible, I'm gonna just expand on the sides here a bit too. A totally useless blend shape, yes. But I think it's cool for the demo. Now I'm just gonna hit this red edit button here, and it worked. I'm gonna slide my animation back. It's applying the blend shape. around about the right time, but you can see it's not moving it back. Interesting. Because that joint is staying there, that's why. The rotation on that joint number 3 is staying there, so it won't. It will only move, the blend shape will move back to 0 as the rotation on that joint moves back to 0, which is what you want. That's cool. Now, like I said, this is a bit of a complex setup. Let's see. Non-deformer history. Save. You can export these guys. I'm just going to export this and call it something. Let's call it test rig to pose. Okay, now what this has done, this has actually created a blend shape for us. I'm going to close the pose thingy here for a second and just take a look here. I have a blend shape here and it has a connection to the joint mid spine 3 and then some funky number which comes from the pose editor, and it's got a connection for that yellow there, so it's definitely got a blend shape on it. This guy doesn't have a blend shape on him, which is cool. Now I'm going to export this to Unreal Engine and see what happens. First, selecting the geometry and then the spine. Export it. I'll just try the rig on its own first. So I'm going to select rig 2. I'm not going to bake animation and I'm not going to choose animation. I just want to see what happens. Export it. Okay, it's moaning about constraints, that's fine. Go to Unreal Engine. Here's my assets, test rig 2, import. No animations, I don't want any animations, there are none. None that I know of. What happens when I tick this? Let's see. Oh wow. Imported it. Ooh, it even found the blend shape. That's cool. That's cool and unexpected. Okay, so the fact that I've selected the mesh and chose, even though I didn't include animation, that doesn't matter, but I did choose skins and blend shapes down here. And in Unreal Engine, when I imported it, I chose animation and it imported that blend shape, which is what I want. That's really cool. I didn't expect that. I just want to demo something else really quick and then we'll finish up. So I'm going to import you again, and this time I'm not going to tick import animations. So remember that it does actually contain an animation, but I didn't export it. So this is quite cool. And here I'm saying import morph targets, but I didn't tick import animations. So I'm expecting a little bit of a different result here. Open up the rig. No morph target this time. It did not import the morph target. So if you don't tick that import animation, it doesn't bring in the blend shapes. Alright, cool. So the first thing you would need to do is create your animations, create your corrective blend shapes, and then export the mesh using the you don't need to tick any of these. Exclude the animation, exclude the bake animation, because what you want essentially now to import into Unreal Engine is you just want the mesh with the blend shapes. So when you import it, ensure you tick import animation. So I just want the rig with its blend shapes. Very important. This has no animation, but it's got the rig with the blend shapes. It's moaning here about my material because it says my material needs morph support. That's really simple. There's this crappy little material here, which is unimportant. Let's give it morph support. And there you go. Give it 2 seconds to compile. Okay. So here's my blend shape, and it's horrible because it's a corrective blend shape. It's supposed to be horrible. Now, how do I get this animation and this blend shape into Unreal Engine? I'm going to try this way first. I'm going to only select the spine and choose export selection, and then I'm going to call this test rig 2 anim 1. I'm going to choose animation. I'm going to choose bake. Keep in mind I did not select the mesh. I want to see if this works. Right, we replaced it. We're getting our normal messages saying it worked. I'm going to hit test rig 2 anim and see what happens. There is no mesh in here, but I do want to import this into this existing rig called test rig 2 skeleton, and I don't know if this is going to work. Here's this delete existing morph target. I'm not really sure what this does. I'm just going to leave everything basically defaults, and let's go see if it worked. And it literally just imported this animation sequence. Okay, cool. So it didn't bring in the morph stuff, which is right. That's exactly what I wanted. I'm just kind of hoping it would work, but it's fine. Okay, deleting that animation. Just saving this. Now I'm going to select the mesh and the rig. See if this works. Keep in mind my blend shape has already been exported to Unreal Engine, and I'm going to hit export again to test rig 2, and I'm going to leave these settings exactly the same, but this time I'm just including the mesh in the selection. Okay, I'm getting the same messages, and back to Unreal Engine, but this time when I import that same test rig 2 anim 1, I'm not going to tick import mesh. I'm going to choose an existing rig and untick this import mesh. I don't want to re-import the damn mesh again, but there is something I did want to do, is make sure that I'm importing animations down here. Untick import mesh, otherwise it's going to create a new mesh. I don't want that. Let's see what happens now. And look at that, the skeleton also updated in this import. Ooh, and I can see something bulging there. That's weird. And there we go, the horrible corrective blend shape's also been imported, which is exactly what I wanted. Tricky, but kind of cool. Yeah, I think that was basically the demo for this. I'm going to try and apply these to our next endeavor, which is probably going to be applying the stuff in game to the fish characters, and then figuring out some stuff, because yeah, the fish are going to be a little bit more complicated. I might not have that many corrective blend shapes, but they might. And I'd also really like customer character customization. That would be really cool. Okay. Music was brought to you thanks to Twitch. Thanks for watching. That's it for today. Let's see here. There we go. Thank you.